Civilization 7 is full of choices. Choices of which map to play, which leader to play, and the choice that matters today, which civilization to play. We are about to make a tier list of all of the civilizations in the Age of Antiquity. If you want to have a look at some of the rules and assumptions I'm making to make this list, pause the video now. But otherwise, I think we should just jump straight in. We start with Aksum. Aksum is a trading civilization with a unique improvement rather than a unique quarter. We start with 2 gold on resources. Now that 2 gold applies to all forms of resources, regardless of whether or not they are empire, strategic, bonus, or the like. It's a very decent source of early game gold. It helps you just to really push the economy in those early turns. 30% production towards Great Steely is a very good option. The only problem with having Great Steely as your associated wonder is that it's very early on in the tech tree, which means a lot of people will often try and beeline it. Luckily, it's right at the beginning of the Aksum civic tree, and as a wonder, it's one of the strongest in the Age of Antiquity, giving you a huge sum of gold that repeats the more wonders you build. The improvement is worth speaking about because the Howlet is both really good and also really meh. Why is it good? Well, it's really quite cheap. As an improvement, it is one of the cheapest to build, both in terms of production, but also in terms of gold. It has no penalty for placing it next to another Howlet. Some improvements, you can't place one next to another. In fact, Howlets are the exact opposite. They want to be put next to each other. They give 2 gold and an adjacent extra culture for wonders and other Howlets. So what you end up doing is making areas of flatland. They need to be built in flatland. And by making nice adjacencies, as you can see, the culture on the tiles gets pretty impressive. So that's all really good. What's the bad bit? Well, unless you're playing a leader or with mementos that boost unique improvements, 2 gold and a little bit of culture can be a little underwhelming. There's no food, there's no production. So you have to be careful not to over rely on them too much. 10 extra trade route range on naval trade routes from the unique trade ship is useful enough. And the fact that it can't be pillaged is also useful if someone ends up declaring war on you. But to be honest, this is not a game-changing ability. The Dhow, however, is fairly handy. 4 extra combat strength on coast means that this galley replacement is much stronger than normal. And the ability to make naval trade routes is a very powerful ability. Why? Well, trade routes in antiquity are very important for pushing through the Silk Road's tree. And the problem with trade routes is that the more you make, the more expensive they get. Merchants are one of these really, really annoying units that get incredibly expensive the more you build. You can see in this particular playthrough, we're already up to 250% extra cost. That 140 production is almost as much as some of the early game wonders. It's incredibly expensive. So the Dhow, well, this comes in handy because it has a fixed production cost. It starts expensive, but once you've used a few merchants, you can simply print these boats, which are normally cheaper. I am using the level 3 boat that gets unlocked at navigation here. If you've only got sailing, it's a lot cheaper than that. And all you have to do is sail it into somebody else's land and make a trade route. It massively discounts the cost of trading full stop. As long as you've got the influence to make more trade routes, it is infinitely useful. The only limitation is that you have to be able to stop in someone's borders. So if they've denounced you or you don't have open borders, they are pretty useless, but it's a decent replacement. The Aksum tree is fairly useful. 1 resource capacity in settlements on coast or navigable rivers is good because this applies to, well, most of your settlements if you plan for it. 1 gold on quarters adjacent to coast is barely anything. You will not notice that. Port of Nations, culture and gold for every active trade route does get quite good if you use your Dhows. Altar and monuments gaining adjacency with Howlets gives them another use. And 15% gold on cities adjacent to coast is kind of okay, but you can see in this run, I have 371 gold per turn, and that would only give me a measly 7 gold. 15% gold is not as much as you think it will be. Like in this city, it would only be worth 8 gold per turn. Finally, ignoring zone of control is useful, but really not game-changing. 2 culture on resources on or adjacent to the coast is one of those little passive boosts. It comes a little bit late in the civic tree for me, but anything that gives culture in the civic tree simply accelerates the rate in which you unlock other things. 1 noticeable absence in this civic tree, it's very simple. It also has no settlement limit increase, which means unless you have a memento or a leader that boosts settlement limit, you will only ever have 6. That is Aksum's biggest weakness. You will not be able to settle very wide. They are all about having a tall, well, not even tall, just a small empire that is incredibly rich. I like Aksum. They have bonuses that kick in nice and early, they scale well, and their improvements are fairly versatile. For me though, nothing jumps out as absolutely game-changing in how powerful Aksum's abilities are, and the lack of settlement limit is incredibly limiting. Not being able to settle wide limits your ability to go into exploration, it limits how many resources you can claim in your own lands, and it limits how much food you can send to your cities. I think I would be tempted to put Aksum in A tier, but for that lack of settlement, I think it's a high B tier for me. They're good, but they're just not excitingly amazing. Next up, we're looking at Carthage. Carthage has one massive drawback. At any point, they can only ever have one city. You cannot convert your towns to cities. In exchange, every time you make a merchant or a settler, in which case it's called a colonist, you get a free one. This is an incredibly powerful ability. Both colonists and merchants get incredibly expensive the more you build. Prohibitively so. If you want to be sending trade routes to everyone you can, you end up having to spend a lot of gold or a lot of production on those merchants. And for Carthage, printing a 3 merchant or a colonist gives you an incredible saving, not only in production in gold, but it also saves you time. You get those units out much quicker. And that means settling around the map in the early stages of the game, and also trading with other people can come incredibly quickly. 30% production towards constructing Bursa, again, is a bit of a double-edged sword. Bursa unlocks very early for everyone in sailing. So ironically, Carthage doesn't really unlock Bursa any earlier than anyone else. 30% production is helpful to getting it built quicker, but its ability, trade routes cannot be plundered, and all tiles in this city that are adjacent to coast and eligible for walls receive a wall, it's not that good a wonder. Trade routes not being plundered is helpful, but it doesn't really give you any benefit. It just saves you a little bit of gold for not having to replace a trade route later. The Numidian cavalry is an incredibly powerful unit. You can only purchase them, so your production will not help you here. Because of that, you often don't even see them in the city screen. You have to remember to go and have a look at them over here. These cavalry units gain strength for every unique city resource assigned to your capital. This takes a little bit of engineering, but as you can see, you can make some rather silly capitals. Cavalry are the strongest units in antiquity, so having extra strength on them means that you can create little miniature tanks that are very powerful indeed. Carthage doesn't often need to conquer, but it's useful having a strong land unit, especially because your naval units are quite powerful. The unique settler has more embarked movement, meaning it can move across the map faster, and +1 population if settled adjacent to a resource. Now, you often need to remember to do this, but it means that you start with settlements with 3 population rather than 2. In the long term, it doesn't really make a meaningful difference to how quickly a town grows, but what it does do is give you the ability to pick up resources much quicker. Say for instance you're settling on an island like this, I can grab the cotton and the fish in the same first turn without having to wait for anything else. That is quite handy. Carthage has a unique quarter provided by 2 buildings, the Cothon and the Dockyard. It gives you gold, food, and production, the Civ 6 harbor combination. It also has the unique ability on both that you can purchase it in towns, so it is the only way, apart from if you're playing Augustus, to build unique buildings in towns. And because of this, you end up building it pretty much everywhere. Now, it's not quite as useful as you would think. Production in towns only gives you gold. It's less efficient, but it's still helpful. But the gold on the Dockyard with extra food adjacency means that your towns can grow pretty quickly and generate a lot of extra gold per turn for your treasury. In your cities, they are a very welcome source of production. It effectively gives you 1 more production building than you would have normally. You only have 1 city, so it's important that you use it wisely, and it helps. However, the Punic port, when you build the quarter, increases the number of resources that may be assigned to this settlement by 2. The effectiveness on this is mixed. Firstly, it depends on how many camels there are on a map. If you look for them, normally you have the trade capacity to find enough camels that you don't really need this bonus. You should also be flooding all of your resources not into your towns, but into your capital. An extra 2 space space is handy, but it's not really going to do too much. On the other hand, it gives you a welcome source of resource and an ability into exploration and modern to take increased amounts of resource assignment. It is especially useful in the modern age if you're looking to achieve an economic victory, because your factories will have more space. From looking at this, you would be deceived into thinking that Carthage had its strong elements, but was a little bit all over the place. The real benefit comes from looking in the Carthaginian civic tree, which is incredibly powerful. 15 extra sea trade route range and extra gold from trade routes in the capital combines all of the best bits of other civilizations and sticks a more powerful version of it into a single civic. Trade makes you rich, and 15 extra trade route range essentially means that you can trade anywhere on the map. 25% gold towards purchasing buildings on coast or navigable rivers is a big gold discount. Most of your civilizations will be adjacent to coast or navigable rivers. Carthage is a seafaring civilization. You want to be near the water. But that card can be taken as a tradition into future ages. It's like having another copy of gold. It is incredibly useful. Everything in the game from that point onwards, as long as it's on the coast, will be cheaper. You also get a nice little increase to the number of resources that you can assign to your capital. Very good for getting the economic pathway. +1 movement to naval units is very handy. It means that all of your boats will forever be able to outflank and outmaneuver everyone else's, making Carthage a very capable war civ. To really push that forward, 25% discount on purchasing naval units and -1 gold maintenance for naval units, a tradition that you can take into future ages, is effectively Isabella's ability. So just by itself, it's very powerful. +1 range to naval units is deceptively strong. There is not a single naval unit in antiquity with more than a 1 range, which means they can only ever attack things they are next to. If you are attacking coastal settlements, it means you're limited to putting boats in tiles adjacent to the walls. Carthage has 2 range, which means that you can get normally twice the number of boats in to attack coastal settlements. It means Carthage absolutely destroys any unit on land and any city center or walled district. 20% gold from mining towns and 20% food from fishing and farming towns is useful in antiquity, or if you're going to be using these towns. 20% gold isn't that big, but the extra food is very handy for later in the game if you're avoiding the hub town meta. Not 1, but 2 settlement limit is huge. Carthage can settle very, very wide. The more settlements you have, the more economic power you have. 1 movement and sight to Numidian cavalry units is helpful, and 1 codet slot in city halls in towns with the trade outpost focus. Now, this is a little weird. Carthage falls down a little bit because getting great library is tough. You only have 1 city, which means you only have 1 place you can put codices to start with: a palace, a library, and an academy for 6 slots. However, the ability to gain extra space for codices in your towns, as long as they have the trade outpost ability, gives you an out. It gives you an option to play Science Carthage. They're not strong at it, but it gives you the option. Extra trade route range there means there's no one on the map you won't be able to trade with. It does mean, however, that if you're going for trade outposts, you don't end up using the mining towns and fishing and farming. Make no mistake, Carthage can get science legacy points, but they are not built for it. They are built for economy, they are built for military, and if you're lucky, maybe you can build wonders, but again, you've only got a single city, so they're not very good for that. Carthage does have drawbacks, but the accumulation of all of the powerful abilities of Carthage mean that they are definitely an S-tier civ. Some of the abilities and traditions you take forward into future ages are as strong as some of the abilities leaders have. They provide a fantastic boost to exploration, and they are a hugely powerful military and economic force that can scale incredibly well. Definitely S-tier for me. Now to the Nile as we visit Egypt. Unlike other civs we've seen so far that require there to be a general theme of being near the sea, Egypt's abilities are reasonably terrain dependent. You are going to want to have navigable rivers and desert, and whilst they have a starting bias for both of them, you are not guaranteed them. And even if you do get them in your capital, you're then not guaranteed you'll have either in any of your other towns, so bear that in mind. Egypt gains +1 production on navigable rivers and has 30% production towards constructing the pyramids. Now, the pyramid is a strange wonder. It has to be built on desert and it has to be adjacent to a navigable river. Some maps do not have a single tile that can have pyramids placed on it. It's rare, but it can happen. So pyramids is not a particularly sought after wonder, unless it is. This is the big caveat. The AI does like to rush pyramids, but often it can't. Do you see what I mean? It's funny. Either it goes really early or it never goes at all. Pyramids itself gives gold and production on navigable rivers, which stacks with the Egyptian bonuses even further. Fishing boats are an interesting improvement. They give some gold, they sometimes give happiness, and they give a lot of food. Fishing boats are normally used to grow a settlement. You want fishing boats to give you population. Fishing boats do not give you production. Fishing boats are not very good at building wonders or getting infrastructure down. So one production on navigable rivers means that you can actually get a little bit of production from the tiles that are otherwise growing your cities. I maintain that fishing boats are one of the weaker improvements, especially in the early game. And navigable rivers, whilst you can get some very large navigable rivers, sometimes they can be a little bit sparsely placed. You can see I actually have managed to get 3 in this game, but it can be tricky. The Medjay is an interesting unit because it is a defensive unit. It has no maintenance, so you don't pay any gold per turn for having them, and it either has a +3 or a +6 combat strength boost, which is quite considerable if it's in friendly territory or stationed in a settlement you own. Medjay are cheap, they are powerful when defending, they are not very good at invading other people. They have no bonuses towards that. They are designed to be a defensive unit, so keep them in your own settlements and spend your production on things like wonders or economy or culture or even science. Protect what you have. The unique Egyptian great person has to be built in a city with a unique quarter, and the lists of them are very interesting. They range from being very rubbish to very good indeed. Some things like a little bit of culture on the palace, gaining some Medjay units, gaining a 3 codex, they're okay, but they're quite situational. Adding gold and culture onto a wonder, again, small bonuses, not game changing. Increased strength chariot units, these are very powerful. That's a big boost to your army if you're being attacked or if you do want to go invading. And great people that allow you to rush wonders, this is an incredibly powerful ability, especially Imhotep, who can effectively sometimes give you half the production for a wonder. You save these great people until you really need something, or you start building a wonder that other people are building and you rush it through. They can be situational and you can't choose which great person you have. So you might get rubbish, you might get really good, but there are some really nice ones hidden in there if you're willing to roll the dice. The mastaba and the mortuary temple represent the 2 parts of the necropolis. Culture and gold as base complements the wonder building that Egypt likes to push you towards. Adjacency for desert terrain and navigable rivers again relies on you having a navigable river desert start. Egypt quickly falls away. You'll notice from most of these abilities, if you don't settle on a navigable river or a desert, Egypt basically does nothing for you, which can be a bit frustrating. The necropolis grants you 100 gold when any wonder is completed in this settlement. Now, it doesn't apply to a wonder in your empire, it is just in this settlement. And the Steely, Great Steely Wonder, gives you 200 gold, so it's a smaller bonus of gold. To be honest, not a meaningful amount. It's not worth building this quarter for the gold. You sort of get it because it's there. If you're lucky, you may get 500 to 600 gold across the age, which, okay, it's good, but it's not brilliant. So far, very situational. And it sort of continues. Minor rivers not ending movement. Handy, but again, not game changing. Extra food on navigable rivers is a fun benefit if you settled on loads of them, but as you can see, I'm at the end of the age, and currently I am only getting +13 food. It is not a tradition that is really very useful, and going into exploration quickly, it becomes obsolete. Medjay giving you 1 gold when stationed in a settlement you own is a very small amount. It's fun, but if you get more than 10 gold per turn from this, you're doing very well. 15% production towards constructing wonders, however, is handy. Now, percentage bonuses are sometimes frustrating because if you only have a small amount of production in a city, it's not going to give you much. But if you can focus getting a lot of resources into your capital or any other city and you flood the bonuses in, wonders can be built incredibly quickly. Egypt is the only civ, I believe, with a wonder construction bonus. 5 gold on the palace, it's quite small. 1 settlement limit is bang average. Culture from navigable rivers is useful, but again, suffers from the same relevancy issue the food does. Egypt are so difficult to place. They are incredibly powerful at building wonders with percentage bonuses, but they don't really have much bonus to production after that. Yeah, sure, a little bit of production on fishing boats, but you don't build fishing boats for production. construction, even with a pantheon, even with the pyramids, they can be very tricky to set up. The traditions that Egypt has also become incredibly obsolete as you leave antiquity, apart from wonder building. And 100 gold? Necropolis is fun, but it's not particularly useful for me. I mean, perhaps this is harsh. If it wasn't for the amazing great people, I would be tempted to place Egypt into the D tier. Not because you can't use them. They can be used very well. They're just not very powerful when compared to other civs. However, the great people, in my opinion, saves them. So I shall place them in C tier. Next up, we have Greece, with quite a simple ability, extra 3 influence per turn on the palace. Early game influence is an incredibly difficult resource to obtain, and it's useful because it's used for quite a few things, all of your endeavors, and the absorption of city-states. Having more influence is a very strong initial ability. It's also worth pointing out that Greece is very strongly biased to having a rough terrain start. Rough terrain means more mines. More mines mean more production, so Greece's cities tend to be pretty productive and very good at building wonders. 30% production towards the Oracle is good in some ways and bad in others. It's good because the Oracle is trapped a decent way down the regular civic tree, so the Greek tree does tend to unlock it a little faster, but it is also locked at the end of the Greece tree, so you're not really likely to get it much closer. Oracle as well is a pretty bad wonder. 10 culture per age from narrative events is an amount of culture that very quickly becomes obsolete. It's really not worth getting out of bed for, so no real benefit there. The hoplite is a regular inventory unit that gets a little stronger if it's adjacent to another hoplite. Nothing really to write about here. Decently powerful in attack and defense, but otherwise is, to be honest with you, pretty standard. It's still the same cost. It still costs as much to maintain. I'm not a huge fan. They're not that spectacular. The Logios is the Greek unique great person. It has to be built in a city with Acropolis, and just like regular great people, you can't pick which one you get. You get one from a random list, and it increases in cost as you go through. Like every great people, they start good and finish pretty bad. Most of them just give flat yields. A little bit of influence, a little bit of culture, a little bit of happiness, a little bit of science, starting a celebration, 3 units. Again, it's nice to have something that gives influence, and a lot of things then rely on the Greek ability to produce influence for other yields. I don't think there is a single great person that you would look at and go, wow, this is really powerful. They're all pretty weak, but they're very, very synergized. So you normally get pretty decent value from them. The unique quarter is an interesting one. The Odeon is a happiness building that gains pretty easy culture adjacency because it needs adjacency to quarters. That's fairly easy to do. And the Parthenon starts with culture, but also gives you extra influence if placed on rough terrain. Again, influence is very hard to get in antiquity. This is a very strong building. 1 culture adjacency for wonders is helpful as well, but I'd like to see another adjacency on this. When built, the Acropolis gives you 2 gold on the Parthenon for each city-state you are suzerain of. Most of the Greek kit is therefore kind of useful for influence accumulation, but the other abilities, not super strong, well synergized, but fairly unspectacular. The Greek civic tree does give some further options, however. Extra influence as a tradition you can take through to other ages towards initiating and befriending independence is a very strong ability. Currently, city-states are one of the strongest mechanisms in the game. Playing city-states well gives you a much more powerful game than most other strategies. Greece, just on this tradition alone, is fantastic to run in antiquity, especially given the fact that you have more influence than other people. 2 culture for active endeavors, sanctions, and projects, that's barely anything. I would normally not even bother to unlock that. 25% army commander experience is very unrelated to anything else you are getting, but again, if you're going for a war build, can lead to some nicely powerful commanders. Hoplites gaining combat strength each city-state you're suzerain of. Now, if you are able to scoop up city-states, it can turn hoplites into absolute battering rams of units. In this game, for instance, I managed to pick up 7 city-state suzerains. That's plus 7 combat strength. These things are really tough now. Very few antiquity civs have that sort of combat boost. 2 culture for every city-state I'm suzerain of is useful because you don't have to put that into your government, but you do lose it going forward. Settlement limit of +1 is right bang in the middle. And then influence towards initiating endeavors and sanctions, that's kind of towards the end of the tree. Handy in some circumstances, but not super powerful in others. I maintain that there is nothing about Greece that is particularly powerful. What Greece is a well-synergized influence and city-state befriending powerhouse that, if you know how to use them, can be incredibly reliable. Influence is gold in Antiquity, and they make it in heaps. If it wasn't for them being so well synergized, I'd put them in the B tier. I'm going to put them in A tier. I don't think they're as powerful as some of the S tier civs, but they do have some good adjacencies, good synergies with their own abilities. Next up, we have Han China. The capital and new towns gain an additional population with their first growth event. It's a very, very weird way of saying when you would gain your first population, you instead gain 2 population. Again, this isn't really going to make that much of a long-term benefit to the speed of which your settlements grow, but what it does do is make new settlements a little bit more useful quicker. It means you can either pick up multiple resources nice and quickly, or you can work a couple of very powerful tiles nice and fast. 30% production towards constructing Weiyang Palace. Well, that is a better wonder. Hidden behind citizenship, which is quite deep into the tree, this wonder gives you 6 influence, a very large boost. It's right at the end of the Han tree, however, so you're unlikely to unlock this any quicker. But if you can get it, it's a very strong wonder to have. The Chukunu is a unique archer replacement with zone of control and higher strength on the defense. It also has +5 combat strength when attacking adjacent units. This basically means that archers have the same strength as warriors, or later in the game, the more powerful units. Kind of means that you never end up making melee troops. These are still quite powerful, and they can hold the line spectacularly well. You can't win the game with them, but they are very, very nice as unique replacements. Once your capital hits 10 population, you can unlock the Shi Dafu, again, a randomly generated great person. One of the nice things about these units is that there are a couple of great works hidden, so if you're going for a science legacy path, it can be quite good for you. There is also a 3 technology hidden there, as well as extra influence and additional science to all codices. Some of them, they're not brilliant, but when you compare these, for instance, to the Greek people, they seem a little bit stronger. The Great Wall is a unique improvement put on any rural tile. However, they cannot branch or fork. You end up making long, stringy lines of them. Now, in this particular game, I haven't really got a good example that I've been building, but you can see I'd be able to spot it here and then start building down, down, down in a line. You make little squiggly lines. There are 2 unique Great Walls in the game, and this one is the worst one. 2 culture is good, and some defensive strength does help if you're looking to defend your own settlements. But +1 happiness for adjacent Great Wall segments, well, it doesn't stack up to some of the stronger abilities later in the game. Extra happiness is good. It means you can run more specialists. You're unlikely to be using more specialists because your population is likely to be on rural tiles. You end up instead taking a small amount of culture that does give you some good yields going forward, but 2 culture really isn't much to write home about. There are some positive things about Han China though. Science buildings gain a science adjacency for quarters is a fantastic way early game for your libraries to gain some pretty good adjacency. You can see this library only has 1 resource, but because it's got 1-2 quarters, it counts as a +3, thus making it very powerful indeed. It's one of those small boosts to science that can really help you get those first codices unlocked quicker. The settlement limit is also unlocked right at the start. That I like. 2 influence on the palace and 1 influence on science buildings. Good ways of gaining influence, but we're dealing with quite small amounts here, and it's a lot of culture to throw into the civic tree to unlock this. An extra 5 combat strength when defending is quite situational for your archer units, but it's handy. And more influence on happiness buildings. Again, you're unlikely to get as much influence here as you might think. Although it was worth noting that counts as being extra influence on every altar. So if you're playing your Pantheon, you will see some of that. 10% bonus science in the capital is a welcome bonus, but again, be warned. The actual capital will be unlikely to make as much science as you would think. Right now, that is only worth 3 science per turn. Not really good as a sort of capstone ability. +1 science from specialists as a tradition you can take into previous or next stages is very handy, especially in exploration when you need those headline numbers. That is a little bit of extra science, but again, small amounts. Overall, Han China gives you some decent influence generating boosts with extra food growth and population and some culture gaining abilities. On paper, they seem really good until you realize they just don't really stack up to other civ civs around them. They have a lot of influence like Greece, but they don't really have the synergy. The Great Wall is a good improvement, but the Howlet tends to be better. They're solid. They are really quite solid, but that's just sort of the problem. They're not really more than that. I reluctantly am going to put them next to Egypt in the C tier. Now, I quite like playing this civ. They're easy to play, but you need to think about what traditions you're taking into the next stage. Where is this going to set you up for your game of civ? There's a lot of Han China that makes you just sort of go, eh. Now we go to Khmer. Districts on rivers do not remove the natural yield of the tile. An ability that it sounds really cool, but it doesn't give you as much yield as you think. For instance, right now, there is a river I have in this settlement with 4 food on it. If I was to put a district on that tile, it would have 4 more food. We're talking small amounts of yields. It's fun, and you can get some really good early game growth, but it's not a lot. 30% production towards constructing Angkor Wat, however, is very handy. Angkor Wat is hidden right at the end under philosophy. It gains 1 extra specialist limit in a settlement, and it is brilliant. Everyone wants to build this wonder if you are going for a culture victory or if you're going for a science victory, and Khmer unlocks it much, much earlier. Out of all of the wonder bonuses, this is probably one of the stronger ones. The unique battle elephant has a lot of combat strength. Cavalry was already the strongest unit in the game, and these are better. They're slow, but they ignore zone of control and they can punch through enemy units like anything. If you do choose to take any sort of war leader into the game, Khmer is a fantastic addition to your arsenal because that 35 melee strength goes to 40. Very little in any age will stand up to you. An absolute juggernaut of a unit. And then you have a unique merchant. It is immune to flood damage and ignores movement penalties from wet terrain. Those bonuses on a merchant are so irrelevant, you will barely notice this thing. It's a shame, but it currently barely does a thing. For all intents and purposes, this is just still a merchant. You might save, if you're lucky, 1 or 2 turns of movement, and that's about it when taking it from your city to the city you want to trade with. The unique improvement is the beret. Only 1 can go down per settlement, and it has to go on flat terrain, but it gives you 3 extra food and 1 extra food for all floodplains on the settlement. It also makes you immune to flood damage throughout the rest of the game, as long as you keep the beret, which is an endless improvement. Now, I like it. It's fun. I would recommend that every city has one, but again, you're unlikely to get more than 7 or 8 food per turn from this. There are synergies between it and the bonuses to gaining food from building over rivers, but again, it sounds really cool, but the meaningful amount of bonus you will gain from this is very, very slim. This game, for instance, I'm running a 1 settlement challenge, and I reckon even with no town sending me food, this is probably doing less than a quarter of the food in this settlement. Now, it still lists improvements, buildings, and districts not getting pillaged by floods as the first Khmer civic that you unlock. This was patched recently to put this ability onto the beret, and they didn't replace it with anything, which is a shame. Full combat strength for units on floodplains, very situational. Rarely do you want to actually be fighting on floodplains because of the combat penalties, but I guess if you've got loads in your cities, it can be quite defensive. Extra movement on your battle elephants brings them back up to regular cavalry movement. 1 gold from specialists is such a small bonus. It's barely there, not worth the tradition. And here we get to the more interesting bits. 50% extra growth rate in the capital, -5 happiness in every other city, combining that with 100% food towards specialists and 100% happiness. Okay, this means the growth rate in your capital is way, way higher. Population after the growth rate boosts in the recent patch will mean that your Khmer capital can be incredibly powerful. -5 happiness in all other cities is annoying. It means you'll celebrate less, but you can work around that. It's not too bad a penalty. I wouldn't worry about that so much. For instance, the happiness you get back from the specialists can often compensate from that pretty quickly. 3 codet slots in the palace also really helps in case you don't want to go for more than 1 city. Like, that would mean that your capital can host, without needing any other city, 9 codices, which is quite powerful. But here is the problem with Khmer. They sound so good. They sound like they should synergize really well, but everything adds together to give you bonuses in antiquity that don't really push you very far at all. And most of the traditions, if you take those through to the end of the game, they barely do anything. Khmer is a civ that starts okay and becomes more unremarkable with every age you go. It pains me, but for me, Khmer is a D tier civ. Next, we go to Maurya India. You can choose an additional pantheon after unlocking mysticism. Now, Maurya India don't gain any bonuses to unlocking your pantheon any earlier than anyone else, so you have to find your culture around the map. But 2 pantheons mean that all of your altars are doubly worth building. Pantheon bonuses themselves, well, they're not going to win you the game, but what they do allow you to do is to make a synergized strategy based on the start you have. For instance, in this game, we went for 1 culture on quarters and a little bit of extra yield to basically give as much culture as we could to our settlements, and it worked really nicely for me. The yields were very impressive. 30% production towards Sanchi Stupa. Again, a wonder hidden quite deep into the regular civic tree in the mastery of citizenship. It gives extra culture for all of your excess happiness. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it normally is more culture than you would think. For instance, this city has almost 60 happiness, which means it's gaining me about 12 culture per turn. Well, it says 0.1. I don't know if that's quite right, but the yield from surplus episodes, I think that's where it's coming from. It's a wonder that synergizes well with the Mauryan kit, although you don't really unlock it too much earlier. Take it or leave it. You can live without that wonder. You also get a unique battle elephant, plus 5 combat strength against fortified districts. This is a conquering beast. It can slam into walls like nothing else. Unlike the Khmer elephant, it doesn't have more combat strength than a regular chariot, so you could argue the plus 5 that Khmer gets is more universally powerful than just having plus 5 against fortified districts. It means it's not particularly good at taking on units. It kind of falls down a little for that, but again, walls, who needs walls when you have elephants? The unique settler doesn't really do anything other than give plus 2 happiness to city halls. It's a small bonus, but it will help you throughout the game. Then to the unique quarter and buildings. 2 happiness buildings. If you are running a happiness build, then this can be incredibly useful. For instance, this game I was playing High Shaman Hamiko. She's just built for this civilization. For other people, having such a large amount of happiness can either be a really good or really rubbish thing. Happiness is very good if you're looking to push over your settlement limit. It's very good if you need to celebrate often. But otherwise, I would argue having other yields can be better for you. It's a good yield to have, but it's not a yield that you need to focus on. Science adjacency from quarters and culture adjacency from mountains mean that you can't really please both of these adjacencies at the same time. The unique quarter gives you 10% bonus happiness in the settlement. So as you can see, absolutely everything in the Maurya Indian kit gives you happiness. You really do drown in it. Now let's look at the civics. Happiness on science buildings is okay as a tradition, but really isn't that good as soon as you get into exploration or modern. Units adjacent to elephants heal a little bit faster. 5 HP is not that much. If you win a war because of 5 HP extra per turn healing, I don't know what you're doing. That's very weird. Gold for every adjacent happiness though, or every surplus happiness, is a big amount. As you can see, we're gaining 27 per turn, and it's duplicated down on this one where you start getting science. So this is where happiness becomes other yields, a little bit of gold, a little bit of science, but not as much as either. Surely it'd be better just to make the gold and the science in the first place. Infantry and cavalry units gain 3 combat strength when adjacent to each other. Here, the bonuses start to build to make this into a very good war civ. Plus 1 settlement limit, plus 10% to all yields in settlements not founded by you. So if you conquer, you can get a little bit of extra yield. Maurya India is a very strange mix. Everything is to do with happiness and altars, except from the fact that you have a unique elephant and some hidden bonuses to combat. Where would I place them? Even if you don't think happiness is that strong a resource, it is undeniable that the Maurya Indian kit hits in early. It's powerful, it's generic, and they are a very good war civ. I'm torn between B and A tier, but I think because of the double pantheon, as long as you can pick that up fast, I'm going to place them in A tier. Now on to Maya. Undoubtedly one of the science juggernauts of the Antiquity Age. Palace gains 0.5 science for adjacent vegetated terrain. You're not really going to get more than 1.5 or 2 science per turn from this. On the upside though, it does mean you get a little bit more science at the beginning of the age, which helps you to push through to either writing or masonry slightly faster than everyone else. It's really not that big though. Mundo Perdido. Now, an interesting one to this. Mayans have a tropical bias. The wonder itself is hidden behind the mastery of mysticism, so it's very quick for people to pick up. The 1 happiness in science and tropical terrain is something that stacks with a lot of other abilities. You can see all of these tropical terrain tiles I have in my capital are all giving me science, and that's partially because of that wonder. Actually, no, it's not. It's not even in here, so this would be 3 science if we had it. Unusual one here, because we actually have to go through to calendar round, which is the 3rd civic to unlock it. So you actually unlock it quicker by going through the regular civic tree. If you're into building wonders, it will help, but you don't need this. Holche. This is a unique archer. It can see through vegetation and it ignores movement penalties from vegetation. It's quicker, it's more versatile. It's not really that much of a boost on the archer. Situationally useful, it won't revolutionize your game. The Jaguar Slayer is a unique scout, however, and this is powerful because this has the stats of a warrior, so your scouts are not going to die as easily. You can also place down Jaguar traps, which can deal damage to enemy units moving over them. Be careful not to ever put them in your own lands because you can't remove them and you can never improve that tile. You've been warned. But if you're trying to escape hostile warriors from city-states, they can be quite useful. The Mayans are one of the better scouting civilizations. It's a very strong unit. I like this replacement. The unique quarter is made up of 2 buildings, 1 happiness that gains culture adjacency from quarters. That's very easy to do. And a unique science building that gains additional science, not just from wonders, but also if it's placed on vegetation. Now, as long as you can place this on vegetation, it has a minimum of 5 science. There are very, very few unique science buildings. This is one of the reasons why the Mayans are so powerful for science. You build this, you build the library, you can have twice as much extra science output than any other civilization at the beginning of the game. And that science is ageless and goes through to future ages. Very strong. The unique quarter gives you 5% production of whatever the cost of a technology was that you finish. So for instance, right now, if I look at future tech, I can see that it's worth about 1,800 science because I'm on 185 per turn and it takes 10 turns. So 5% of that would be 90 production. So as soon as I finish future tech, I gain 90 production in the capital, which is quite a large amount. Now, this was really, really nerfed from 15%, which it used to be before patch 1.2.0, but 5% is still a meaningful amount, especially because that is in any city that has the unique quarter. As long as you keep your science high, you can use that technology to then give you bursts of production to make wonders, to make armed units, or to make other science buildings. And that production stays for the rest of the game. You can use it to finish spaceport projects, the World Fair, the Manhattan Project. All you have to do is just leave a bunch of techs 1 turn away from being finished and then go pop, 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 and hey presto, you win the game. Unreasonably strong, even at 5%. Imagine what it was like at 15%. Those were the glory days, honestly. Holche and Jaguar Slayers gaining stealth is fun, but not super useful. +3 combat strength against wounded units through the ability to gain poison is situationally quite useful on attack or defense. The Mayans are not really built as a defensive or attacking civ, so a little bit of the boost is useful. That is a very fun tradition though to take into the later stages of the game if you're looking to use your technology to go down the domination path. Alter gaining science adjacency from vegetated terrain and a tradition that gives you science on vegetated terrain in cities means if you can build amongst the trees, the science in the first 50 turns is obscene. Nobody can tech like the Mayans can. It really is just ridiculous. And again, another nerf here. After researching a technology, you gain culture. After researching a civic, you gain science of 10% of the original cost. Again, it means if I've done a 1,800 technology future tech, I would gain 180 culture. It's free. You might as well have it. It just means as long as you've got really good science, you'll gain some culture. If you've got some good culture, you'll gain some good science. You fill in your own weaknesses. +1 settlement limit is good, and 2 science on happiness buildings and 2 culture on happiness buildings means that you can use your altars for more yields. And don't forget, one of your unique improvements is a happiness building. You do need a little bit of vegetation to make the mines work, but vegetation is one of the easiest things to get on the map. And this is all the tropical terrain, for instance. Vegetation goes through this really quite nicely. It's everywhere. It's so much easier to find than rough terrain or even biome terrain. Some civs are easier to place than others. The Mayans are immediately up here in the S tier. And I think sometimes when we think about other science civs like Han China, or maybe even to an extent someone a little bit like Khmer that focuses on specialists. It's easy to think, yeah, they do get some science, we should put them higher. Then you look at Maya and you think, yeah, I get it now. Okay, that makes sense. Now to the Mississippian civilization, the masters of the geese. All buildings receive a +1 food adjacency for resources. This is an incredibly strong ability. Effectively, find a resource, put a building next to it, and you gain food. Every building gains the food, and it counts as an adjacency, which means that food is then further boosted by specialists. So for just a single resource, like for instance this building next to this colon, a completed quarter would give 2 extra food, and a specialist on that tile gives another food on top of that. So you can see it starts to really get higher. It works especially well on production and science buildings like barracks and libraries, because not only do they gain adjacency from resources anyway, but then the specialists multiply the food even further. 1 specialist on this tile means that this library and barracks combination is generating 6 food by itself. Remember I said that the Khmer food ability was just a bit underwhelming? This is why. That's just a library and a barracks. That's it. Anything you build next to resources gains this ability. This quarter has 9 food. This quarter has 12 food. Don't ask why. It just does. People forget that anything that increases adjacency is boosted by specialists. The burning arrow is an archer that has increased bombard strength, so you don't need to bother building bombard units. It has extra strength against siege units, and it sets tiles on fire, dealing between 10 to 20 damage extra on top of the regular damage you do with them, especially if you use them to, say, shoot into a city center where a unit is trying to defend. They are brutally powerful. You unlock them really early. They are, for me, probably the best unique unit in Antiquity. The merchant, to be honest with you, again, you will forget about. It's just like a regular merchant, but you gain a bit more gold for every resource when creating a trade route. This effectively means if I create a trade route to, for instance, this settlement, I would gain 125 gold. I would use that gold to offset against the cost of having the merchant in the first place. It's slightly useful, but really, it's not that good. The pot cop is a slightly strange improvement, and I wish this was a little bit better. It has +1 gold, it has to be built on flat terrain, and it gains additional food for each adjacent resources. So again, just like your buildings, popping it next to a resource means that you gain extra food. Now, this is an incredibly successful run of mine. I loved this game, and as you can see, I built 1, because the problem with pot cop is any tile that it makes sense to build it on, it would be better just to put regular buildings there. Any food adjacency, you want your buildings to take, not your unique improvements. So it can be a little strange. Also, 1 gold is really not that good. It is almost like it's not worth it even being there. One thing I will say through it, it is remarkably cheap. So you can spam them down pretty quickly. If you're using a leader that likes them, or if you're using a memento that likes them, then I can see them being okay. But it's nowhere near as good as the Howlet. Goose Societies is a good ability, but where Mississippi really shines are within the civics. Firstly, Monk's Mound is an incredible wonder to have a production bonus on. It is right at the end of the tree in commerce, so people are not going to be competing for you, and you unlock it really nice and early along with your settlement limit. 10% production towards constructing buildings is just a nice bonus to have. But here we go. Shell tempered pottery, one of the best traditions in the game. All buildings receive a +1 gold adjacency for resources. Now, this is exactly the same bonus you have for food, but you now also have it for gold. It's an adjacency. Specialists make it even better, but this is why it's so good. This counts as a tradition, which means you can take it into exploration and the modern ages. And unlike all other traditions in Antiquity, this thing scales like an absolute demon. It is quite easy in even modern for this to still be one of the best things in the game. I've seen 500 to maybe 1,000 gold on this thing. It's very powerful. Burning arrows, pillaging tiles within 2 tiles is just fun. It means when you're sieging, they can be very powerful. And 4 combat strength for ranged units when defending, it's not that good. It's one of the worst traditions. 2 resource capacity in the capital stacks nicely with the Monk's Mound to make sure you've got a very powerful capital. hurdle. And if you import resources, gift economy can be okay. I would like to see that being golden happiness for ages, but it's okay. Mississippi, for me, are a difficult one to score. And here's why. I want to put them in the S tier, just for shell-tempered pottery and the extra food bonuses you get from Goose Societies. But the rest of the kit kind of lets them down a little bit. If the pot cup was better, if the merchant was better, I'd be more tempted. But burning arrows are really good. They are somewhere between here and here. No, I think they've got to be S tier. I don't think they're quite as strong as these two, but they are up there with the best civ in the game. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. Next up, we have domination specialists. Persia. Persia gives infantry units 3 combat strength when attacking. Now, it's very important to point out that that bonus does not apply to any other unit other than infantry. So for instance, this ballista is not getting the bonus, but this immortal is. It's worth pointing that out because a lot of people don't realize the Persian bonus only applies to infantry units. Luckily, there's a couple of things that do help out. Firstly, production towards the gate of all nations. This wonder is very easily unlocked, hidden in the discipline mastery. As you'll know from watching my videos, it's one of my favorites. That's pretty good because it's no easier to unlock via the Persian tree. That gives you no benefit, but this wonder is absolutely fantastic. It is amongst the best in the game, so any production bonus towards it is very welcome. The immortal is a unique infantry unit that heals after defeating a unit. The problems with it are that it isn't any stronger than a usual unit, so it doesn't have a ranged attack like it did in Civ 6, and its melee strength is exactly the same as the unit it replaces. 15 health is also nowhere near enough to even probably recover the damage that it took in the combat to kill a unit, so it's not particularly reliable to use. You never go into a battle thinking, oh, I'm going to use this to get my 15 health. It just doesn't work. I think the immortal is lacking. I don't think it's strong enough at all. It basically is just a warrior or a swordsman or something like that. The unique commander is a little bit better. It acts as a regular commander, but when you build it, it starts with the initiative assault promotion. Units can move after unpacking from this commander. Now, this is quite good. It's effectively a 3 level on all commanders in the assault tree, which is the best tree for attacking. It means that you can go down to advancement quickly to get an extra 5 combat strength when at full health on infantry attacks, and it means you can unlock things like order and merit a little bit earlier. Commanders are incredibly strong for war, so unlocking them a little earlier is good. The unique building is a unique improvement that cannot be placed next to another unique improvement or the same type. I'm avoiding saying it. The Peridasia. It's not how you say that. 1 culture and 1 gold. Just like I had slight issues with the pot cup, there's very little reason to ever build this because it's reasonably expensive and it doesn't really add much. 1 gold and 1 culture, and annoyingly, even though there is a problem in the sense that you can't place them next to each other, there is no extra yields on top of them. They're just not very good. Let's see if the Persian tree makes up. -1 maintenance for units is decent, but often this isn't going to save you as much gold as you think unless you print an absolutely mega army. Kara is a pretty decent tradition to take through into another age, however. 50% production towards training infantry units does mean you can print units quite quickly, so that is powerful. 3 gold for every town. It helps, but it's not that much gold. The first of the settlement limit is in the satrapy's mastery. The Achaemenid Empire has the second in its mastery. And then we start to improve the unique building just a little bit. 1 happiness from adjacent quarters. I won't lie, it's again not a huge amount compared to other improvements. +5 gold for every different civilization you've captured a settlement from sort of punishes you for taking out a single empire. Again, not a very large amount of gold at all. And 3 combat strength for units in enemy territory sounds good, but again can be fiddly. Right now, for instance, I am being attacked and I am attacking. Units that I attack in enemy territory, well, I actually have to have my unit in enemy territory as well. So right now my ballista wouldn't even get the power. Equally, if I'm defending, if I'm attacking in neutral territory, you have to be stood in enemy territory to get that boost. The only good thing is that, again, that is a tradition that you can take into the exploration and modern ages to power your army going forward. On paper, Persia is a very, very specialized invasion army. The problem with Persia is that every single ability and unit pretty much comes with it a restriction, a caveat, a lack of power. In my head, Persia were works as an idea, as a concept. It wants you to throw an army, but it doesn't really give you too much to help you make the army. It wants it to be powerful, but it's using infantry units which are categorically weaker than cavalry units. I want to like Persia more than I do, but unfortunately right now, unless they receive a few buffs, I consider them to be a D tier civilization. They're fun, and again, just like Khmer, you can have good games with them, you can play them well, but when I compare them to the power strengths of the other civs above them, it's an easy choice for me. Last but not least, we have Rome. Rome is a civ that has some very powerful abilities and some very underwhelming abilities all mixed together in quite a confusing package. +1 culture on districts in the capital and city centers in towns. The towns are a little bit easier to do. Every town basically gives you +1 culture, so the more you settle, the more you conquer, the more culture you get, although +1 really isn't much to write home about. It's a very, very small amount. Districts, though, are a little bit better. Culture on districts in the capital basically means the more districts you make, the more culture you get. Again, a small bonus, but the bigger your capital is, the better it becomes. That culture can be useful in the first 20-30 turns of the game, but again, you find it dwindles quite a lot. Production towards the Colosseum is a little bit more exciting. The Colosseum is relatively protected by the civic tree at entertainment, so it's difficult to get to, but unfortunately it's no easier to get to in the Roman tree. However, it is one of the better wonders in antiquity, basically providing a city with almost infinite happiness to use as many specialists as you want. Simply build around it and the happiness will flow. The Legion used to be the most powerful unit in antiquity. Unfortunately, it was nerfed in one of the previous patches. It used to have +2 combat strength for every tradition in the government. Now it's only +1. It takes the Legion from being incredibly powerful to a bit meh. Again, like the Immortal, it suffers from the problem that infantry units are not as strong as cavalry. In fact, I'm actually using an old build of Rome for this video. This is an old save file I took from a video a few months back, and you can see the +8 combat strength is still there. Alas, that would now be +4. What does it mean by tradition? A tradition is any government policy that comes from the Roman tree. There are 4 in total: 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means a maximum of +4 combat strength. It makes them tougher, but really, it's not enough to make them legendary. The unique army commander is a little bit quirky. Every 3 levels it has, it can place a settlement. So as it levels up, it gains this button, and you can, without having to use a settler, make a town. Now, this saves you on production cost of settlers, which means you can put more production into your army. That's brilliant. The problem is, most of your settlements you'll want to be conquering. And even when you're not, there is a lack of settlement limit in antiquity. Antiquity is the one age where settling is something you just can't do. It feels like this is an ability out of time. If this was a legatus in the exploration or modern ages, it would be insane. In antiquity, it means at the very best you can focus on defeating villages and independent nations, and maybe having a couple of skirmish wars in order to make your settlements without needing settlers, but early game settlers are pretty cheap. It's a bit mixed. Speaking of mixed, the Forum comes in 2 parts, the Basilica and the Temple of Jupiter. We have a gold and a happiness building that have interesting adjacencies. The Basilica has +1 influence adjacency for culture buildings and wonders. Temple of Jupiter is happiness buildings, and wonders give culture. So unfortunately, unless you put wonders near the Basilica and the Temple of Jupiter, which I've tried to do in this playthrough, you will find that the adjacencies are a bit different. I find unique quarters like that tough to place. If both of the buildings need a different thing, either one of the buildings is going to do nothing for you whilst the other one shines, or both buildings will be a little bit underwhelming. The Forum also doesn't do a huge amount. Just like the Legion, it gains culture for every unique tradition in the government. That is a maximum of +4. Now, obviously, the more cities you have, the more you get. But having to hog your entire government with these cards, I don't know if it's worth the 4 culture. Unlike Persia, though, the tree does come with a few extra things. Extra production towards military units in the capital for every town. 5% doesn't sound like a huge amount, but it quickly does become some. In every normal game, assuming you use your settlement limit, you should have anywhere between 5 and 7 towns, which is 25 to 35%. And unlike for Persia, that's production towards any military unit, so you can use it on siege, cavalry, or ranged. The Legatus gaining the Bulwark promotion for 3 basically gives it the ability of the Persian commander. Different tree. Bulwark is this one. Land units within the command radius complete fortifications 1 turn faster. It's one of the stronger bonus promotions from Bastion. It means that any unit, including itself, can build a fortification in the same turn you press a button. Very handy on the defense. Training an infantry unit grants culture equal to 25% of its production cost. Now, the actual production of this doesn't give you a ton. If we have a look at Legion, a tier 3 Legion is worth 50 production, which means every time I make one, I get 12 culture. Not a lot. But what this card doesn't tell you is that whilst you have it, it's not just training an infantry unit, it's also upgrading them. So if I was to spend gold right now increasing my Legion, just pop in commerce, you can see this in action, I still get the same boost, and it actually gives me a boost equal to the full value of the Legion. So it actually gives you more than you might think. 2 gold in the capital for every town you own. It's not a lot, but in the early game, it can give you some very nice gold. Gain a free infantry unit in new settlements that you've found. You're unlikely to get more than 3 or 4 from this, but more troops are more troops. 5% food, gold, and culture in towns without a growing town focus. Now, this basically means if you specialize a town, it gives you slightly more culture, gold, and food. 5% though is not a lot, especially if we compare it to something like this that gives 15 or 30%. Yeah, again, nice yields, but a bit underwhelming. Then we have an extra social policy slot. Not many governments give you extra policy slots from the civics in the civilization tree, so that's cool. And 1 production on urban districts in your capital. You can see we have 10 urban districts in my capital. We count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on that island. Okay, so that's where the 10 culture's coming from, and it's also where the 10 production's coming from. So what is Rome actually built for? Definitely domination, but it's also built for expansion, and it gives you 3 culture just by being. For me, the big difference between Rome and a civ like Persia is the synergy. All of Rome's abilities really nicely tie in, and unlike Persia, there is actually a potential to reliably hit some quite powerful strategies. 2 settlement limit always helps. The ability to put settlements down without settlers does save you production, and some of the traditions you take into the next ages are incredibly versatile. For that reason, I'm torn between leaving Rome as a B or a C tier. I think I'm going to put them in B, but again, if I compare Rome to, say, regrettably, Carthage, or even India, no, for me, they just don't quite stand up. Other civs do culture better, other civs do expansion better, other civs do military better, but they're pretty in the middle. What do you think of my list? Anything you think I've missed? Charlemagne here thinks I have. Let me know in the comments, and do let me know if you like this sort of video. I'll be sure to make more. I had a lot of fun making it. Thank you so much for all the support on these videos. I really appreciate you all sticking around. Thank you. See you next video. Goodbye.